I'll go ahead and call this school board workshop into session. And as usual, colleagues, as I go through each item on the agenda, superintendent or staff, if there's an item that we need to pause, please just let me know, and we'll do that. All right, of course, item 1 will be the opening. Item 2 is the approval of the agenda and changes to the agenda, and we do have a change. Let me go ahead and read that. This is a change to the consent agenda correction to item 8.15. Should be an amendment to service agreement number 18-73, Northwest Florida State College. Added item 8.24, HRA contribution for new group medical insurance rating tiers, presented by Mr. Russ Frake, Specialist Risk Management. And this item is added as an emergency due to the time constraints imposed by the requirement of a 30-day open enrollment window that must be processed before closing the December payroll cycle. So that's the changes that we have. Section 3, recognition. Section 4, visitors. Section 5, public comment. Is there any, are there any blue cards submitted for today? All right, thank you. Section 6, administrative and personnel appointments. Section 7, committee and staff reports 7.1. In-county travel paid for the period of August 23rd through September 19th, 2018, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. 7.2, out-of-county travel paid for the period of September the 7th through the 19th, 2018, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. 7.3, Liza Jackson Preparatory School Incorporated annual financial statement and supplemental audit for the year ended June 30th, 2018, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. 7.4, Okaloosa Academy Incorporated basic financial statements and supplemental information for the year ended June the 30th, 2018, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. 7.5, the Okaloosa Public Schools Foundation Incorporated, a component unit of the Okaloosa County District School Board, financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2018, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. 7.6, the School Board of Okaloosa County, Florida, and the Florida Department of Health in Okaloosa County, Florida, to provide school-based flu vaccine clinics for students through Healthy Schools, LLC, presented by Mrs. Terry Schroeder, Program Director, Student Services.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, ma'am.
Would you come forward?
Welcome, Ms. Schroeder. I saw you in the audience.
We've been discussing this for a few days, and I know Ms. Schroeder has been in touch with them, and then she and I discussed an additional little implementation that we could do to avoid any situation that might cause us some concern.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So, and I do have Brittany Manners from Healthy Schools LLC. That's their community manager here with me today. I'm going to ask her to come forward in case you have any questions directly for Healthy Schools. But first of all, I want to say we've been partnered with Healthy Schools for 4 years now, and we have had really no problems with the flu vaccine administration at our schools in the past. I understand there's some concerns. Santa Rosa County's issues came up, and we all know how the media works and how that gets publicized, and so I've asked Brittany to come and share, come on up Brittany, to come and share some additional steps that they have put in place to prevent and to keep this from happening in our district. Just so you know, they are finishing up over in Escambia County, immunizing
7,000-ish
students over in Escambia County, and have had no additional issues because of what they've put in place. So I'd just like for her to share for just a minute what they have done to prevent it from their side, and I'll share with you our side.
Sure. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to be here. I just want to briefly touch on what she said. So last year in Okaloosa, we immunized around 3,000 students. This year, if numbers stay consistent where they are, we'll be immunizing around 6,000, which is great. It was a bad flu season last year, and we really want to, immunize as many kids as possible. As Terry explained, what happened in Santa Rosa, and I'll be very vague in how I describe it. It was an isolated incident at 2 schools that happened simultaneously. The moment we became aware that there was an issue, we put policies, not policies per se, but procedures in place to immediately stop it. There were no further incidents. As Ms. Schroeder alluded to, the media can get a hold of something and it can look very different. We're actually in the process of trying to get a retraction because there were things that were stated that were absolutely untrue. I don't know any other way to say that. So what I will say is, there was confusion around the consent form. We had some parents who signed it, filled out the health insurance information, the student's information, checked, the health questions, signed, dated, and printed their name, and then wrote no somewhere else on the document. That's what happened. But it was isolated. So we have put policies in place to ensure that that does not happen again. Like she said, we're about to finish up in Escambia, have had no incidents, and have immunized nearly 7,000 kids over there. We'll be finished in the next couple of days. We foresee and anticipate absolutely no future problems with this, because the moment we realized what happened, we put it in place, we nipped it in the bud immediately. But I will say to you, we did not immunize any children who did not have a form filled out and signed. That did not happen. And again, we're working to get some things printed and put in the media to try to take care of that, but you know how it is, and I'm not going to go any further into that. But I hope that alleviates your concerns, and if you have any further questions, I'm happy to go into more detail.
Well, thank you. Board members, anything? Ms.
Well,
Rush?
just for the public who might be hearing for the first time that flu vaccines are in our schools, they are not administered by school district staff. It is through your organization that administers the vaccines, and
That's
as
correct.
you stated, it's a opt-in form.
Correct.
So students are not automatically vaccinated.
No.
Their parents must fill out a form.
Yes.
That you stated. Because of the issue that you mentioned in Santa Rosa County, where possibly a parent or two did complete the form, but then somewhere wrote on the form no. Can you kind of
Absolutely.
describe? I know Terry has sent board members an email or responded to a question that I had once I heard of that incident. The extra step that we are doing to ensure.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. We have put in a 4-step process where 4 sets of eyes are laid on every form before an injection is given. They're scanned in, so we have a digital copy, but then that digital copy is on the tablet at the school with the nurses giving the injection. So after it has been checked by 4 people, the nurse also has it in front of her, and she's looking at that form. So technically speaking, 5 people look at a form before an injection is given. So that's more people, more eyeballs, less chances of anything taking place.
Okay, so the form itself hasn't changed?
No, the
It's
form had
ju-
already been sent out, unfortunately, in all districts.
Okay, so the change or addition this year is that we'll have more adults reviewing it, and again, that the actual vaccine is administered by a nurse.
Yes.
Through your company.
Yes, and if any of you saw the school board meeting for Santa Rosa County that was online, yeah, we don't have medical technicians. We have only LPNs and RNs on staff, only.
And I can't remember, did you say what the cost was for this?
For
the flu shot?
There's no cost to the district, there's no cost to the schools, there's no cost to the parents.
Right.
We work directly with the insurance companies. If the child has insurance, we can bill.
Okay.
If the child doesn't have insurance, then we don't bill, but we still will vaccinate. We want to make this
Right.
available to all students, but there's
And
no
that-
cost to the district, to the schools,
And
or
I
to the
think
families.
that's the point, that it's free, is what
It
it amounts
is,
to.
it is. And I mean, health services in schools, it's just become a thing, that's necessary now. We're doing dental, we're doing immunizations, we're doing a lot
Right.
of different things, because that's the one place you can reach kids. Transportation is an issue. The time it takes to leave leave work, take your child to the doctor to get a flu shot and come back, because it can't be given if you take your child to the doctor when they're sick, because they can't receive the flu shot if they're sick. It's not given in line with, a lot of the other immunizations. So a lot of times it's an individual appointment, and many parents just can't afford to take off 3 or 4 hours of work,
to go get a flu shot. So a lot of students, were it not for this program, would not be getting flu shots, period.
That's right. That's right.
And I do want to say too, and let me just thank Healthy Schools, they have also implemented a program with us and with Russ's office this year to offer those immunizations to our staff as well, at no cost to the staff member.
There you go.
All they have to do is bring their insurance card, and it doesn't have to be our insurance. It can be TRICARE or their personal, anything that they have, and we're immunizing the staff as well. So, I thank them because I know that we've had some problems this year getting our community providers involved and going to our schools. So I think that's another benefit. So if we can get everybody that we can, maybe we'll have a better flu season this year and have healthier kids and staff.
And this is not time for personal testimony, but I'll just say I had a dose of that flu a couple of years ago.
Yes, sir.
And it's not something anybody wants, believe me.
That's right. So we do start next week. I wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of the schedule, and also what you guys have in front of you as well on your laptops. There is a copy of the consent that has been sent home to every parent. They got them for the most part. Most schools sent them in the back to school packets, and so a concern I had with that was parents forget. I forget what I had for breakfast on some days. So my concern with Healthy Schools at the beginning of the year was we need to remind parents that they signed those consents. And so for those schools that sent them in the back to school packets and then sent them back to Healthy Schools is notifying those parents and reminding them that they signed that consent so that there's hopefully no surprises. Oh, and we all know when you get those packets, there's so many forms in there that they sign. And so just a reminder, hey, we're doing flu shots at your kid's school, and just wanted to remind you that you completed a consent. And then obviously if they want to rescind that, they certainly just need to contact the school or Healthy Schools as well to rescind that consent.
And that's a lot of extra work, but I appreciate that you're doing that.
Would you share with them the piece we have put in place
yes,
as a district?
Yes, ma'am. And so Ms. Jackson and I talked earlier in the week, and one of the things that we're going to do from the district side is every principal has been asked to delegate to Healthy Schools a collaborative person, someone to sit with them as they're looking at each consent form on this tablet, or if they have the paper copy, to just be an extra set of eyes. So we've got a set of eyes on them. They've got 5 sets of eyes on them. And so from our side, we have somebody as well, number one, identifying those students and also looking at those forms with our eyes, saying there is nothing else written on here, the box is checked. The other thing is if there's any questions, if the yes box is not checked, they're not going to give the immunization. Even if the parent has signed the form, if they didn't check the yes box, they're not giving the immunization. So we're trying to take all of the question marks out of this.
Does a note go home with the student if they receive the vaccine at school saying?
I know a note goes home if the parent signed the student up and they didn't get the flu shot for maybe they presented with a fever or they just emotionally were upset, we give a letter of non-vaccination.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure that a letter goes home stating that they were vaccinated as well.
Right.
And if they were a digital sign up, it'll be an email.
Okay. I was just trying to recall with my own children, and so I wanted to know that. In addition, you mentioned that some schools sent this form home at the beginning of the year. Is this form available online on our website in case it's been misplaced? Or
Yeah, there's a website. It's simply ocalusaflu.com, so parents can go there and sign them if they want to.
Okay.
I believe they can actually even download a paper form from that website there as well.
Okay.
They can get contact information for Healthy Schools if they have a question, if they signed their child up a month ago and changed their mind, or their child got a flu shot last week at the doctor's office. They notify us, and then we can remove the child's name from the flu shot list. So yeah, there's different ways.
And I'm glad you brought that up because that was my last question. I know when vaccines are given, they're recorded in kind of like a centralized database.
Florida shots.
Right, Florida shots.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
if you're able to pull that up and just double check that a student hasn't.
They do enter
Okay.
all of those flu vaccines into Florida shots. So there is a record for the pediatrician. There's a record, for anybody that has access to that database. They do enter those in there.
Okay.
Anything else, board members? All right, good job. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll go ahead now and move down to Section 8, Consent Agenda. 8.1, Approval of the Consent Agenda. 8.2, Approval of the minutes of the special meeting of September the 20th, 2018. Minutes of the workshop meeting of September 20, 2018. Minutes of the regular meeting of September 24th, 2018, recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.3, Appropriation of District 3 School Board Member Capital Outlay Funds to Okaloosa Technical College and Choice High School for Salto padlocks for the Salto door lock system in the amount of $8,282.14, presented by Mr. Rodney Walker and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.4, Invoices to be approved for payment, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.5, School Donations, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.6, Authorization to appropriate federal impact aids and to make a payment in the amount of $11,799 to charter schools and AMI Kids Emerald Coast, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.7, Permission to pay a materials and supplies stipend to qualified adult vocational teachers, behavior analysts, mental health counselors, occupational therapists, physical therapists, school psychologists, social workers, and staffing specialists, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the superintendent for approval.
And Dr. White, I was just going to comment that this is just another example of categorical funding and for the general public so that they know, unfortunately, we are not just given funding and get to choose how to spend it. This is categorical funding that it states by statute that only certain instructional members can get that categorical funding. So because the statute doesn't provide funding for all of the job descriptions that are listed in this item, the district recommends or is recommending today with this agenda item that we distribute materials and classroom supplies for these instructors. So it's discouraging that our legislature would provide for categorical funding for materials and supplies for teachers, but then not recommend that we give it out to all of our instructional staff.
All right, thank you. All right, 8.8, price increase for ITB 15-01, custodial chemicals and supplies, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.9, renewal of ITB 16-02, wastewater treatment plant operator, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.10, termination of contract ITB 17-04, lawn care services, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director of Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
I'd like to comment.
Yes, sir, Mr. Bryant.
Actually, I was kind of glad to see this come up because I will say that when we approved this last year, I did have a concern on how low the bid was versus what their scope was going to be. And I was at several schools this week and noticed that talking to the principals that they weren't getting the level of service that was expected. So I appreciate the company that we awarded the contract to, acknowledging that they obviously can't keep up with this, and maybe we can find hopefully another contractor that will come in and be able to at least give us what we are asking for at a fair price. But like I was at Meg's the other day, not Meg's, I'm sorry, it was anyways, I was out of school the other day, and the lawn was in bad shape, so it hadn't been done in a while. So, I'm like I said, I'm glad that this company has acknowledged that, and at least we can now go to somebody, find somebody who will be able to provide what we're expecting. So,
Well, and I hate to do this to Mr. Bolton, but I'd like you to come up because I still have concerns because if I understand the agenda item correctly, it says that we are going to issue a new solicitation for lawn care services. And this is where I need your help in assisting my memory. This is the second time, the current bid is the second time that we've had a lawn care services bid. We had a previous.
Incorrect. This is about the fourth or fifth bid.
Okay, so that's what I
had.
couldn't recollect. And to my knowledge, again, in what I see at schools, every year, obviously, a concern for most principals is at the beginning of the year. We know that. The lawn care service companies have to know that. And, we live where we live. But, I think this existing contract, we've had approximately 15 months. Because I believe it started in July. And I'm not aware, but I don't know if you have record of any facility that received, 1 or 2 cuts every month, because the contract is for 20 cuts annually. So that roughly works out to most months having 2 cuts. Did we have any facilities in that 15 months receive 2 cuts?
Sure we did. The way we set up a template schedule was of course, the growing season. We actually requested 3 cuts in June, July, August, 2 cuts in the April, May, September, 1 cut in the months on the end of that, and no cuts in the non-growing December, January time frame. But what we've tried it various ways. We've done multiple. In the first contract, we awarded multiple vendors. There was probably 5 or 6 vendors on the contract. One vendor had a number of schools, and the others, half the district was spread out amongst the other 4 or 5. So we tried that, and we had problems with those vendors.
Right.
And then we awarded it to, the vendors were telling us that, hey, if you could guarantee us to award it where we can know if we get a low bid in, we could have at least 5 or 6 schools. So we listened to them, and we did that. We set up the bid where it's awarded. The district's divided into 6 areas for the lawn care, with 6 schools in each location, and tried to award it that way. The vendors that had the idea didn't submit bids that next go around. So we ended up awarding it to 2 contractors. Then one bailed on us in the middle of that, and the other contractor took over the whole thing, which we had for the previous contract. This last time they rebid, went up $50,000, and the other contractor that we just had bid the same price that the previous contractor was doing the service for. So even though it seemed like a low bid, it was what the other contractor was doing it for.
But he had
obviously
taken over
hasn't,
for the other vendor who had
right,
bailed out.
and obviously it hasn't worked out, and we've listened to all and in the course of that bid, we've also tweaked it 2 or 3 times, listening to principals, asking for their input. They wanted, for lack of what we call, it's called other services, but some have raking demands, some have flower bed demands, all the other peripherals, if you will, of lawn care, that we tried to set up a way to let them have a couple of those services during the year. Well, guess when they want them? Right there before school starts, when the rain and the demand for cutting the schools is at the peak. So that's
and the growth season.
And the growth season. So that's not a good method either. But what we're looking at, we're looking at the different options. We're seeing whether or not how we can tweak it. We're definitely looking at not awarding it to the whole district to one vendor. We can put some stipulations in the contract that says limits that to, say, a maximum of a couple of areas. Just for example, I'm going to work with purchasing, and we'll tweak that bid if that's the method that we go. We're also looking at internal methods, but those, of course, are costly, and you have if you have lawn care custodians, if you will, you know, that their primary job is lawn care. What do they do during those non-growing seasons? So keeping them gainfully employed, I'm sure principals can find something to do, but it is, we'll look at that option as well.
And I'm sorry, I was just going to try to, I don't remember, I do remember at one time, and I don't know if it's still the same way, that there was some discretion that principals had as to when they had the particular cuts that were contracted provided, that they might be able to work with the company and say, hey, I need you guys to be here at this time, and helping to decide when the particular cut at their school would occur. I don't know if that's still the case.
Early on, when we had multiple vendors, it was a little easier to do that. Okay. But when you have one contractor dealing with all the schools and trying to specify the time, he can't cut everybody after 3:30. Right. He can't cut everybody on weekends. Right. It's impossible, and we realize that.
So that was a good situation when we had that before, where we could work with the vendor to do that. But I understand that based on the scope, that's probably not the case now.
Yes.
And I guess that's my point. I mean, I want the public to understand this is an area of service that we had to cut, essentially, because we used to have more custodial services, and those were in-house employees, just as they are now. But at one time, we chose to outsource custodial services, so we stopped asking custodians who were at that school, who were, again, a long time ago, taking care of lawn care needs and minor maintenance needs in addition at their school.
And it was costly, because you had equipment costs.
Well, you have equipment and labor costs, but I guess, you know, if we're going to, you know, put a new solicitation out for bid, I would like to see, you know, possibly other options, because as you've just explained, for multiple years now, we haven't found something, and nothing is going to replace what we had. But, you know, there's events throughout the school year that don't coincide with growing seasons. And like it or not, what people see our schools look like, whether it's the cleanliness of a restroom or the maintenance of their facilities on the outside, that's your first impression. As you also mentioned, we have a variety of facilities. Some have huge lawns. Some have weeds more than grass. Those don't really have growing seasons. And we have some facilities that have a lot of hedging or shrubbery. We have others that have more of a need for bedding issues like pine straw. So our needs are so varied, and our facilities are so varied. I'm concerned that we've tried, you know, different methods for contracting out, and I guess I want to see a comparison of some other options. If we were to do it in-house, you know, could we have in-house labor and equipment by zone? I don't know, you know, but I'd like to have some other options besides.
We're in the process of putting that together, and we'll work with, we'll present something to the superintendent and show her and come back to you based on what we determine there.
Okay.
And I would also say that it sounds like we're talking about the way it used to be done in the old days, which was a site-based plan.
Yeah,
Each
right.
school took care of it. And if you didn't do a good job of it, the superintendent had a visit with you and made sure you understood the priority of it. It is so different from school to school. You know, you may have to move back towards something like that. They get a budget and, you know, take care of your needs. You know,
I don't know the
something
solution, I guess. I'm just looking for options.
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
It's a tough one, and I know it doesn't sound a lot like instructional leadership, but as it's been suggested, getting the grass cut's important. Because for most of our citizens who pay taxes, all they see of that building and that facility is when they drive by it.
Yes, sir.
And when it doesn't look good, that's not a good impression. All right. So I think we're all on the same page. Thank you, Mr. Bolton.
And Dr.
Appreciate
Wright,
your
it
work.
was
Yes, sir.
Elliott Point Elementary School was the one I was referring to.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Bolton. And I'm sure they're not the only one,
No,
because
sir.
I think
No,
they're
sir.
all struggling trying to take care of this, because they know it's important too. All right. Let's go ahead now and take a look at item 8.11. RFQ 19-01, Construction Total Program Management, TMP Services, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Dr. White, I have a
Yes, sir.
couple of questions regarding this, and I
Okay.
would like to thank our school board member, Mr. Walker, for heading up this group. But this is a big task here, a big contract that we're going to sign, and I just wanted to ask some questions regarding some of the things that have happened. And I guess one of the first questions is going to be about school security with, you know, the experience of with the school security enhancements since the Parkland shooting. Was that I didn't get a chance to read everything with what was in the meeting, but I would just want to know about the school security enhancements. Is that something that was brought into play when we were talking about
All right, now I see the superintendent stepped out, Mr. Bryant. Mr. Chambers, do you have folks here today that may can address Mr. Koutsaratus? I'm deferring to Mr. Chambers. It looks like he's appointed you.
I didn't even see her get up, I'm
I
sorry.
think you pointed to the right direction. What is your question?
So the
Mr.
question
Brown?
is what is the experience that the company has with school security enhancements?
Are we talking about Jacobs Titan?
Right. Obviously, this is who we're going to be going with, or even, I guess, Ajax was the other company.
Right. Well, here's the situation that we have, and so both companies, from what I looked at, had experience with that. But what is driving what we're going to do since the Parkland shooting is we've had safety team go around to every school. We just wrapped it up yesterday. So the team consisted of myself, Steve Bolton, Lieutenant Venuti, Captain Peacoat from the Sheriff's Department, a gentleman named David McLemore, who is a retired civil service anti-terrorism expert. And so we met with each school, their SRO and their principal, and assessed their individual needs. And so what we have is we are meeting in early November. Our school safety team, district safety team, and we are going to prioritize the schools based on need. And so we'll have a priority of what schools are most vulnerable. We don't want to share that, but we will have that prioritized, and then we will also get whoever our contract, our total project management company, whoever that is, and in this case we're going to be negotiating with Jacobs first, but we will take them around to the school and say, this is what we want as far as safety. This is what the team has come up with. We want X, Y, and Z, and come up with a plan to do that. We think we know, but when we get an architect involved, and they can, now they're taking into consideration other things like structural needs and access to power and that sort of thing. So we're going to tell them what we want, and we're going to let them design each one, and then come back with a projected cost for the district. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's what we're doing. So to me, it would, either company, any company that we went to, we would say, this is what we want, come up with a design for us, and then we'll go from there. We obviously with the right to tweak that and go forward.
And another question, just real quick, the cost per student station modifications that the Florida legislator made in relates to building new buildings. Can you give us a comparison with both, was that brought up?
Well, what we had was an RFQ, a request for qualification. So we did not, that's not a question that I would have asked either company. In fact, I did not ask that question because we did not get a request, an RFB or RFP. We were just looking at qualifications. Okay. So, I mean,
and that's,
we're going to
that's
refer
the process.
to the attorney.
The selection was an RFQ. So the qualifications of the firms what were being evaluated, we did not get into issues of rates and prices and those things. That's what will come in negotiation.
All right, so Mr. Bryan, are you suggesting that you might like that included in negotiations?
I don't think it would hurt, but
All right, you heard that. Okay, you got it.
Okay, we'll make sure we include it.
yes.
I had one question, Chairman.
Yes, sir.
The rating was pretty close. 1 point separated them. I believe is what I read.
Right.
The length of the contract is proposed to be, or is that even part of this at the moment? Is it
Still
our old
5
contract?
I think the RFP called for, I think, a 5-year contract
saw
with the
that.
potential for renewal,
Yeah.
which has been standard with this program. Primarily, the consideration in the construction area has been many times those projects, take
Go
longer
longer.
than just
Yep.
a little bit of time. So what we've always done with this contract is said that if it's going to be a 5-year term, then we don't allow any new project to begin after the term's expired, but we do allow projects that were already
Finished up.
underway to be finished.
Yeah.
But it takes longer sometimes to get these kind of projects designed and then approved and then out of the ground and then built. So that's why we have not, not used any shorter term on construction.
Gotcha. And the renewal clause is,
Our normal 1 to 5 and 5 1.
So-
And
so
typically
this-
the renewal would be a mutual agreement of the parties, so it
Yep.
would not be a mandatory thing.
okay.
Well, as you know, we had a little controversy because we did change the procedure. This is the 5th time that we've had this contract. Okay, well, for whatever reason, it was changed and the rating scale was changed a little bit. There was no problem. And also the fact that normally we had the meeting in the same day. For instance, we had a presentation made in the morning, we voted, and then we immediately voted after that on the same day. For whatever reason, the proposal was changed, and we met on 1 week, and then kind of confusion came about because I was led by our attorney to understanding that technically when we met the first time and looked at the RFQ and evaluated them, that if we decided that we wanted to vote that day, if we voted that day and whoever was awarded the contract, then technically we could have ended it there and not had oral presentations. Whereas in the past, we always had oral presentations in the morning, voted immediately that afternoon, and then did as we now will be coming to the board. Well, we changed it this time, and so then the rumor got out there that me as chairman of the committee was not being fair to everybody by the fact that we voted at the meeting that 3 members decided they still wanted oral presentation. So once that was said, then the attorney advised me that we couldn't vote that day with the first meeting. So then that means we set up the second meeting, which was when we had them present their presentations. Then immediately after that, we voted after that. Well, the thing that we need to remember is this will be the 5th time we've done this. And regardless of RFQs and everything else, but if you talk, you know the way you really look at who you do business with, and what you do is, the old saying, like when you're hiring people, and Mr. Bryant can tell you from being a man, sometimes an interview is the worst thing in the world. But here's the thing about it. In 25 years with this company, we've never had them to renege on any bid that's ever been made with a guaranteed contract. They've had several jobs through the years where they've lost up to $250,000. They've never came back to Rita or this board and quibble one bit. Well, the greatest thing you look at is whether they've done the job for all these years. But regardless, as Mr. Desson pointed out, the voting was very close, and the other company was a very good company. But there were several factors that, if you really looked at it, on the RFQ, and I went back and researched it, is Ajax, our contract, when we first went into this business, they filled the boardroom up. The contractors was just so adamant that they thought that they were not going to have an opportunity to actually do the work for the school district. Well, at that time, the school board made sure that we put in the RFQ that they would perform none of the work except if the school board, under emergency situations, asked them to do so. But and that's still in there at this point. Well, when you go back and look with Ajax, they perform all the work themselves. 95% of all school work they've ever done, they do all the work. And that is what we made sure that we didn't get into for all these years. All of our local contractors, and what we call local, that's naturally in the panhandle here, and that's what we've already adhered to. But now, as I said, in the years past, when the committee has met as we did this time, and we bring it to the school board, there's never been one quibble. And I'm assuming that when we bring it this next, assuming if the board approves what the committee did, then immediately, as we've always done in the past, Ms. Scallion, myself, in this case, Mr. Kucheratis, and the attorney will sit down and work out the contract, and assuming, and you know, you, ladies and gentlemen, we all know one thing, and Mr. Chairman, you've won being a principal. But if you look at their track record and you go to our finance officer and ask her, in the 24 years we've done business with this firm, we've never had a quibble with them. We've never had an argument about payment or anything. And with the score being so close, I want everybody to make sure, though, that we was very, very fair to both firms. As a matter of fact, we gave them, I even let them exceed their time limit if they wanted to. And so, as I said, I would hope that if you have any questions or anything, feel free to ask me now. But we did really spend a lot of time on this. And I'll be honest, if we'd have had problems with this firm over the time and years, I'll assure you one thing, that with Miss Scallion had said, Mr. Walker, look, this has happened, but it hasn't. And I think that all of you board members that has had any dealings with the schools, and Mr. White, the chairman, can tell you that usually now, if a firm, as we kind of got in about the lawn service business, hey, let me assure you, these schools, if they're not satisfied, they'll let you know about it. And I just wanted to kind of give you a light brief on the thing, and hopefully if we pass it Monday night, then I'm hoping to immediately want us to start negotiations so we can get a contract in place so that if some jobs need to be done, they'll at least be eligible to do them for us. That's all.
Yes,
Dr.
ma'am.
White,
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Skipped over. I guess, you know, I think the biggest concern, and just again, so the public understands, this is a total project management. And Mr. Walker, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I think we're probably the only school district in the state of Florida who's using a total product management program for construction. And there's pros and cons to total project management. The biggest con being is that guaranteed maximum price. You know, the con is that the management company is going to, in this case, you know, do design fees, engineering fees, there's a risk contingency fee, there's another fee on the sheet that I'd have to recall, but and again, that's so that they can guarantee a price for a particular project. I guess the concern that I have after your comments, Mr. Walker, are that while I certainly want to employ local contractors, I think regardless, whoever would get the total, the TPM contract, it'd be to their benefit to hire local contractors regardless of who they are, because that's going to be probably their cheapest contract price because they're local. But you know, we want the best price and the best work for the district. So if that isn't a local contractor, then it behooves the district, especially in these dire times of little capital money, to do a whole slew of needs. The other concern, and again, I don't recall, when we have put this out, this RFQ out before, we haven't had very many companies respond. And in this case, we have two, and one is the company, as Mr. Walker stated, who's had the contract for 24, 25 years. And again, I'm not knocking Jacobs or L3 and the services that they have provided, but there's a reason why we're putting it out to RFQ. Otherwise, we would just sole source, you know, this management company. And we have had issues. I think financially we haven't had issues, but in all fairness, and correct me if I'm wrong, our two newest schools, there were some ADA compliant issues that weren't addressed in the construction of those two schools. And I think for the district going forward, I think in the past and even currently, the district has gone with this TPM program because of a lack of in-house staff. We have a minimal staff for facilities and maintenance. And then with the staff that we do have, we don't have a professional engineer on staff. We don't have an architect. As Dr. White in a previous meeting had stated, the board has the authority to hire an architect.
But it costs.
But at cost. So there's, and what the pro of having a project management company is, you have all that expertise, the engineer, the architect, the designers in that project management company. It's disappointing to me that we didn't have more than two people respond. Were we hoping, or were, you know, when we put out the RFQ, were we, you know?
Rush, the reason you didn't have but two this time, if you go back and look in the past before, there was money. Okay, well, the reason, no, with the last time we did it, we had 6. One time we had 10, but that was when you had millions of dollars available. Well, at this point in time, it's surprising, really and truly, that nobody responded but the one that was already in-house, because if you look at the future, for probably the minimum till we could, if and when we could ever pass a sales tax, do you realize that we don't have enough money in construction to build a outhouse? So that's the reason that you didn't have any firms bid this time, because really and truly, for the next 3 years, there's gonna be virtually nothing available because we don't have any money. In Ajax, technically, because their office is in Tallahassee, but when they have a project such as, for instance, right now, they're doing a large project in Defuniak and doing the courthouse in Crestview. So they felt like that they would have presence here, so they decided to bid along with the fact that Jacobs is here. Well, the only reason that Jacobs would naturally, the fact that they're already here, they're in place, they have everything there, sure, they'd like to continue to have communication and doing business with us because they've done all these years. But trust me, Ajax and them both really bid for one reason, hoping that maybe within the next couple or 3 years we could pass a sales tax where then the contract would be worth something. Technically, the contract now, they won't, neither one of them, whoever would have got the business, neither one of them's going to do very, very little work because we have very, very little money. And when you talk about, if you look at the program, the Senate and the House in Tallahassee, 2 different times have bragged and said about the project. When you mentioned about we was only district and did it, they have complimented Okaloosa County for the efficiency and the fact that the way the program's been run, that in the 22 years that we had a unique situation of the fact that we had shared savings. It never been heard of before. Well, in those years, we have shared savings for $18 million over those years. Well, everybody says, well, why do you have shared savings? Well, if they say, why don't you just let the district have everything? Well, if you go back and look, before we got into this operation we now have, there never was anything left over. Well, what it amounts to now, there's incentive that if the people that do this go out and do an efficient job, that and at one time we split 50-50 and then this board renegotiated down to 40-60. But in all the years past, what you had was when we tried to do it in-house, what we always ended up with was 35 change orders, and there was never change orders in our favor. It was always more money. And
took longer. That was one of the other things. It took a lot longer.
Exactly.
You remember that?
And when you talk about one thing, is always in the past, when we had a large project or built a new school, we never asked the people in the schools what they wanted or what they needed till after we built them. And the idea of trying to get into the fact of where we want to have our engineer and our architects, hey, we tried that one time. The cost is exorbitant, plus it was a total failure. And let me assure you that when you go back and try to do it in-house, with the maintenance department was not designed to do large projects. And the biggest thing, you know, it's like Publix grocery stores. I'm using that because Mr. Bryant's sitting over. Well, you know, they're rated the most efficient, best run grocery chain in the country. Well, you know, when you look, they do an outstanding job in every area. And the thing is, I'll say this, never in the past till now, when the committees met and would come back, I thought that's what the committee was for. But when you was sitting there adding all, I don't really understand, because really you spent 1 year doing the job. I've done all them years. And I would have hoped that you would have seen how it worked and how efficient it has been for this school district, because we used to stay in lawsuits. We continuously never had a job. The last 3 big construction jobs we had before we went to the way we now do it, every single one of them was at least $500,000 to $2 million over budget. And I mean, I just can't imagine that we would ever consider wanting to go back and do it in-house. I just can't imagine us ever thinking about doing it. And I'm just real surprised that after you spent a year doing what I've done, that you would ever not realize how great and efficient this project has been.
Well, I think you didn't hear me correctly because I stated there were pros and cons to TPM. So I wasn't, and obviously I approved putting out the RFQ. I guess I just was, you know, hoping that we could have, and I think it is important to reimagine things, that we can't live in the past and can't dwell on the work of previous employees, and even in light of the award nominee before us for Monday evening, again, I stated that I haven't had an interaction that's poor or indifferent with Jacobs. I simply was stating my concerns about what is before us on the agenda.
And I appreciate all of that from both of you. I guess the thing that I would say, and I mentioned about timeliness, is that my anecdotal experience was that when the company came in and said, we're going to renovate your entire school in a period of 9 weeks, and some of the folks sitting in these chairs have done that, and they had to bring in the trailers, and they had to take all the things out of the classroom, and one thing I knew that someone told me a long time ago was that whether I was ready or not, school was starting on day X. And I had a lot of fretful evenings and worry about those projects, particularly that project when they renovated the entire school. But they did it, and it was astounding that they were so successful in just those few weeks. So, but that's just my own personal experience with timeliness. And Mr. Walker, I know that in the past when we've tried to do some of these ourselves, if I remember in one case, I think it might have been in the Central Zone, that project ran over almost 2 years. So anyway,
and again, that was over 25 years ago with different staff members.
I know. We always want to improve and be progressive.
Right.
But in this case, those are my experiences. Okay, so is there any other comment on this one? Because we're going to vote on this one. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I did want to just clarify the changes Mr. Walker made reference to in regard to scoring and process. That was not done just for this RFQ. We made some changes through purchasing a couple of years ago and some scoring methods, and have been applying those to any RFPs or RFQs that have come along. But this was the first time this one had rolled back up for solicitation. But those are some changes that were implemented across the purchasing department. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good comment. Thank you, Mr. McKinnis.
And I would point out that the rating system they used is a lot more rational and fair than some of the ones in the past where you could have just gigantic ranges in the scores. So that was a positive step.
Yes, sir.
All right. So unless there's any further comment, we'll move on to 8.12. Tag on bid over $25,000, Allen J. Fleet Sales, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director, Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Mr. Chairman, I'd
Yes,
like to ask, where is Steve? Oh,
He moved up front. He's in the front.
Steve, I'm sorry. Could you come forward, you and Mr. Gutierrez, and explain your rationale for the need for these vehicles?
Yeah. Well, before Steve gets into the technical pieces, what we have here, these vehicles that we requested, they are needs, in my opinion, and not wants. These vehicles are in the 20 to 25-year-old range. Some of them do not have towing capability, and so the vehicles are necessary for us to be able to conduct our business as a maintenance and facilities department as we move things around. If for our welders to to pull trailers for our folks to pull the portable bleachers. And these aren't just half-ton pickup trucks. These are 3/4 ton and 1 ton trucks. So I'm going to let Steve go into the details, but I wanted to start with that.
Welcome back, Mr. Bolton.
Thank you, sir. The problems with the trucks, the oldest one's a 93. It's had continuous electrical problems, which we tried to identify and deal with, and thus far a mechanic, outside mechanic, hasn't been able to find the problem. It has no towing capability. One of the 94 trucks, the transmission has serious issues. It has no towing capability. The bed is rusted out, it's as old as it is. We have problems with the 1 ton, the throttle sensor. There's no air conditioning, even though it's been replaced before. It's out again. The brakes are about to go out on it. And some of these things where before we go and do these major things, we're holding in place before we continue to try to apply the Band-Aid or the paper clip. We have the 97 Ford that's limping along with its engine. Its suspension is shot. And then on the another 97 GMC, the transmission needs replacing, and the air conditioner is currently leaking. These are just some of the current things right now. We have all of them have well over the 100,000, upwards of.
Go one by one and give them the amount.
That oldest one only has under 20,000, but it's all local miles, which are hard on it as well. The 94 has 242,000. The 97 1 ton has 177. The 97 3/4 ton has 148,000, and the 97 GMC has 175,000. Again, those are all local miles, so they're not taking long trips, but that wears on them just as much. And of course, yes, we could continue to work on those, but as multiple trucks are down at one time, I'm not able to have the guys out there doing the work that they need to do, whether it's addressing athletic fields, and this is all the heavy equipment guys hauling dirt to them, whatever the case may be, that the types of jobs that they do. So,
well, I guess that rules out what I might have asked. I might have asked you to park them out front so we could see them. But in this case, what I'm hearing is they might not even be drivable. And but the second thing would be is what will you do with them if we were to vote to approve this?
These would be surplused and sold in the auction, as has been the case with the others.
Okay. Well, I remember one time I received one at a school, and it might have been drivable. But I'll tell you one thing: it was super helpful to have that pickup truck at that school when we had to clean up the stadium and haul trash and do things like that. So if there's any way that could be done too, that would certainly be appreciated. I think there might be some principals that would appreciate receiving one of those trucks, although I know they don't need any more albatrosses either.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything, board members?
And again, I appreciate the detail involved in the needs, and I'm not questioning the needs of these trucks. And I did not get with Rita or her staff or you to inquire about lease opportunities, rental opportunities. Of course, we're not hauling stuff every day. But I mean, I'm sure there's busier seasons, certainly when we're repairing, like you said, fields and tracks and things of that nature. Is that an option for leasing or rental of some of these heavier need trucks, the 1 ton trucks?
We haven't fully explored that. I understand those are options. There are leasing capabilities. I'm personally wouldn't be, just based on my personal experience, wouldn't be a fan of that. But
well, and again, I'm only inquiring,
yes,
not because I'm questioning the need for replacement vehicles, but as I've stated at other workshops and capital budget workshop, I want us to find money to cover walkways to portables that kids are going to be in for the near, short, long term. And we're required statutorily to do that. We have students walking in the rain, getting soaked every time it rains in this county. And this is $191,000. And I hate to pit one need against the other, and so that's not my intention. But if you're able to provide some info on lease and rental options, and maybe, you know, that isn't a direction that the superintendent wants to go in, but if the board could receive some input regarding that, and estimated costs associated with that, I guess I would appreciate that.
Okay.
One
Yes, sir.
question.
Mr. Guest.
Age, condition of these maintenance vehicles, how would you say it compares to the age and conditions of the school bus we're hauling the kids around in, school buses?
Well, it's comparable, and the difference I would say is that each bus shop has a shop full of mechanics, not full, but has several mechanics tending to those. I don't have internal mechanics tending to my equipment. It's all farmed out to local folks to do the maintenance of those things. So the bus shops do help us out sometimes with some of the, but when they're backed up, obviously the buses have a priority when it comes to the us versus them. So they do help us when they can.
Okay, well, you know, I would suggest you look at the lease option and see what we can come up with to try to spread this money out to some needs. You know, otherwise I won't support this on Monday, because, you know, as Ms. Thrush pointed out, we have other needs that would take a priority in my mind, and I think we can lease some, and if that's a cheaper option, then that's a better way to go, to loosen up some money. So we'll look forward to what you guys have to say on Monday.
Yes.
And
Well,
that's a short turnaround, but I was just going to say, when you look at those options, then it might be helpful for us to have some idea of anticipated leasing cost
Yeah, we'd have to know that.
as contrasted with purchasing cost. Okay?
Okay.
And for the length of time that you would anticipate you need these vehicles.
100% for this reason. Our transportation is a disgrace. The buses is a disgrace, and maintenance vehicles is a disgrace, simply because we've not been able to keep them. And several years ago on this board, we had it automatically built into the budget for maintenance. We had $200,000 set aside that was permanent in the budget every year to try to update your vehicles. But now, if any of you, I'm almost embarrassed when I ride down the road sometime and see some of these maintenance vehicles. And I mean, any way you cut it, and I know we're desperate for money in every area, but just really being what these gentlemen are asking for is we desperately need it. Sure, we need it in every area, but the thing that we got to remember is these people are out there riding on the roads, and they're in unsafe vehicles in many cases. And those are things that I think we need to look at, and very true. Many districts have a maintenance shop for vehicles for their maintenance department. We do not have that. Now, and so consequently, many times your vehicles, yes, will not last as long as where if you could maintain them and everything on a regular basis. But I can tell you this, regardless of how it turns out, I would support purchasing the vehicles, because not only do I think it's desperately needed, but it's very much a safety factor that I have to look at. And when I tell you, I don't know, I mean, I went out and seen some of these vehicles parked in the various offices, and that's the word I'm using, it's a disgrace. And I hate to say this, and I know when you have virtually no money, you're trying to figure the best place to put it, I can understand us having a different opinion. But I have to say that and you know, when we get into this leasing and all this, I can tell you one thing. Districts have tried it every way in the world, and there's really, no matter what, when you're purchasing new vehicles, the cost, you may save a little bit here, a little bit there, but the way that Vince now has the system set up to where he shops all over the state of Florida of who has the best price. And yes, this is a perfect example to where you can't stay local, because most of the time the local dealers cannot match them large dealers that's on state contracts down the south. But anyway, we beat it to death. And
Mr. Walker, I appreciate your comment, because the other day I happened to see the courier van. And we might not get a picture of that and put it on the screen. And I don't know where that's at on the replacement cycle.
That's coming.
Okay. Well, I mean,
I've actually ridden in that van. So
dangerous. I mean, I suspect.
And again, I wasn't questioning the need at all. I agree that it's a safety issue, and it's not right that we have employees in unair-conditioned vehicles. So that was never my statement at all. Just wanted to see what other options were there.
Sure. Okay.
And one more bite at the apple. I'm embarrassed when I see those ESE kids walking in the rain.
Right.
Sure.
So this is all around a bad situation. What I'm asking y'all to do and what the district to do is figure out how we can at least make progress on both issues. And if you come up with some way to do that, then I'm happy.
I'd like to address the ESE issue. I've spoken to principals individually and said, hey, why don't you move those over the summer, move those ESE kids inside and put students that aren't as fragile in these portables. And so with the superintendent's direction, I can make that happen and say, I want all ESE students in the building. And we can do that whenever I'm told to do it. We can do it at semester, we could do it in the summer, but that's an easy fix if it's an ESE issue.
Well, and again, I would just say all kids are walking in the rain.
True.
So
I was just addressing the ESE issue that Mr.
And again,
brought up.
each site has different needs and different requirements. And I know these are awful choices that teachers and administrators have to make, but they're made collectively with teachers and the students in mind. But regardless of the type of student that's in a portable, we're required to have a covered walkway to that portable.
And you said covered walkway, and so what I would like to see is, I would like to see Steve and I get quotes on using, we have wood frame and metal roof walkways. I'm very hopeful that we'll have a sales tax passed here soon, and that these canopies will come down because we'll be building wings. And so what I don't want to see, or what's going to take so much longer, is to go up and put the Cadillac version of an aluminum posts and all metal walkways that take a lot longer to build than if we would get some contractors and or quotes of, let's put up some 4x4 canopies, 4x4 posts, and obviously everything would be built to code because we have our building inspector. And we can go a lot further with the money, and because I'm hoping it's only for a few years. I mean, when I was the assistant principal at Baker, we have where the bus ramp is. There's some portables that have been there over 30 years, and so has the wooden canopy. It is still there, and it was there when I was there in 1994. And so it's still there, and it's wooden. And so that's a lot cheaper route than going with a metal canopy. If we're worried about money, if I'm given that direction, we can do it.
That's certainly a viable option we'd like to look at.
Well, we'll certainly discuss this, Mr. Kutsaratus.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, we passed a policy, if you go back and look. Now, we passed many years ago, previous boards and superintendents, when it was passed on them canopies, that decision was made, and the reason we changed the qualifications because of the supposed that when you went to wood canopies that they started looking terrible and started, you know, being deteriorating. It makes absolute difference to me, because the only thing I say about canopies, at some point in time, hopefully some school board is going to be able to pass a sales tax, and from what I've been told by everybody, as our first goals on bids, we want to be able to get rid of the portables, and so that means when you spend a bunch of money on canopies, then you got to be careful. If 5 years down the road, if you pass a sales tax, we go spend big monies on these canopies, and then we get rid of them. So you have to look at all that now.
Mr. Walker, to address your point, we are going with metal ramps as opposed to wood these days, coming from the portables. So I just wanted to make that clear.
The walkway and the handicap ramp, we've gone to metal on that.
I have one more thing. So
Yes.
would you talk about the successful vendor in this particular proposal? Who was that? How did that happen, et cetera?
Yes, sir. The looking at the contracts on that through purchasing, J Auto Sales is on the. Hold on, I've got the contract here.
This is
Allen J.
okay.
Yes, sir. Even with Allen J, they're on two different contracts. There's the State of Florida Sheriff's contract, and then there's the National Auto Fleet Group contract. And we looked at both of those, priced those out, and actually the National Auto Fleet Group was lower by $2,000 per truck. So we saved on within looking at comparing contracts even, and that was with the help of Mr. Wyndham, of course, getting us to where we've got the best price off of these state contracts Mr. Walker was alluding to.
There you go. Okay. All right, gentlemen. Anything else, board members? All right, thank you. Thank you. All right, moving on to 8.13. Tag on bid purchases over $25,000, Jerry Pate Turf and Irrigation, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
I had a
Sure,
question, Mr.
sure.
Chairman. I just didn't get a chance to talk to Mr. Bolton, so this appears to be equipment replacement, a Toro Reelmaster.
A real mower, yes, ma'am, off of a contract again, and it would be servicing the South Zone School, Choctaw primarily, with the fields there, the athletic fields that is used quite a bit. We've got the grass on the stadium, the grass in the football, soccer, all of those fields in that area there that mower is used for. It's a golf course type mower that turns like this versus a regular rotary.
That's what I was
mower.
wondering,
So
if it could be utilized for other things besides.
A real
fields.
mower, the way it's cut, and golf courses know this, it facilitates the growth of the grass and helps maintain it much better than your typical rotor blade mower. So it is a little more expensive, but it is necessary to maintain those fields. Go back 5 years ago, and the condition of Choctaw Stadium, Etheridge Stadium, was atrocious, and but we've got it looking pretty good now, if I do say so myself. But this is going to help maintain that for the years to come.
And we haven't even talked about insect control.
Yes, sir.
Did their existing reel mower fail? Is it broken, not repairable?
They have an outdated tow behind that it's not irreparable right now. So to get the real mower there where they can take care of those fields in an efficient manner, this is what is best to go to versus the old fashioned. It's like pulling in a say a disc or a bush hog. Yes, yeah, is a type of real mower they had previously.
Okay.
And it's 50,000, am I reading that correctly?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Yes.
it is, the mower and the blade.
Yes. Any other questions?
Thank you again, Mr. Bolton. All right, 8.14. Amendment to Service Agreement Number 19-31, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.15. Amendment to Service Agreement Number 18-73, Northwest Florida State College, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.16, Service Agreement Number 19-49, Twin Reeds, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.17, Service Agreement Number 19-51, Twin Reeds, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.18, Service Agreement Number 19-52, Diamond Dells, Gem Mining of Florida, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.19, Service Agreement Number 19-54, Northwest Florida State College, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.20, Service Agreement Number 19-55, Aaron K. Hackey, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.21, Service Agreement Number 19-56, Connect ASL Incorporated, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.22, Sale and Disposal of Surplus Property, presented by Mr. Steve Bolton, Director of Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Dr. White-Eye.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bolton, real quick, I just wanted to let you know how much I appreciate next door to see how organized our room is back there with all the surplus. If you walk back in there now, I mean, it's desks are right where they're at. I mean, it's just a lot of room in there now. It looks a lot neater, a lot more organized. I think y'all can see what we have, what we can get rid of. And, you know, we've had a busy week here this week, so I apologize I didn't get to call you, but we're talking about excess vehicles and things like that. When I was up at Carver Hill the other day, I was noticing over in the background there's some vehicles there that are just kind of just sitting there not doing anything. What are our plans? Because we talk about image and all that, and not a lot of the general public goes over there, but when they do, I mean, they see these vehicles that are just sitting there just collecting weeds.
We have a the vehicles take a little longer to deal with in surplus and actually get in the auction, but they're brought up. We have two locations. We have them back here in the back, and we also have down in the south end where we have a fenced-in area, buses as well down there that we cordon off and try to set aside for the auction. And so that's eventually what will happen with those as well.
Yeah, it just kind of looks like a...
Yes, sir. And you know, it takes a little bit of time to get all those resources there to do that with all the other things we're doing. To be honest, yeah, we know it needs to be done. It's way down on the list, but we will get it done.
Right. Well, and again, if anybody gets a chance to walk over here right after the meeting, go over there and take a look. It is really a great job what they've done over there the last couple of weeks. So.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. All right. 8.23, multi-year lease of Avaya telephone equipment, AGC Networks, presented by Mr. Steve Horton, Assistant Superintendent of MIS, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Sure, come up,
Mr. Horton.
All right, tell us what's going on.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. You know, unless the board wants a complete rehash of everything from the last workshop, we subsequent to that last board meeting where this item was pulled, Mr. McGinnis was able to finish work with the leasing company who was able to provide us with a lease that met all of our conditions and requirements. Ms. Scallon and Mr. McGinnis both have worked with us and been instrumental in getting this taken care of. We had three goals really. One of them would be to standardize the phone systems throughout the school district to get them on our internet, voice over internet piece. So this lease will allow us to do that. We wanted to do it in a cost-neutral fashion so that we weren't asking for funds that could be used for something else. So as we mentioned last time, we'll be able to eliminate the CenturyLink phone bill, which was approximately $300,000 a year. So the lease payments that we'll be making will be offset for the most part by that savings in phone bill. And then once we get past year 3, we believe we'll actually see a lower telephone cost for the district than we're currently experiencing. So we're pleased about that. The other thing that we wanted to do was I just want to make sure, bring to your attention, is we're interested in negotiating a 90-day window at the front end for us to get our phone system installed without having to make any payments under this lease agreement. And the purpose would be because we would still be paying some CenturyLink phone costs during that first 3 months as we work to complete schools and port them over to the new system. So we wanted to avoid paying 2 different payments for essentially the same service. Because of that, the commencement date identified in this lease is December 8. There's the possibility, if the board approves this agreement today, that there may be a very slight adjustment in a monthly payment. I mean slight as in, $50 a month over the course of it, something like that. But we believe that the ability to begin this process now and get the phones in the schools, I just want to make sure that the board understands if that were to be the case, then we would bring this back, bring whatever that adjustment would be back at the time of the commencement. The rate is indexed to a Treasury fund rate, and so that's why there was a trade-off there to be able to get the work done now and not have those double payments for possibly 2 to 3 months, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I see Ms. Scallon nodding her head, and that's all I need to know.
One question, Chairman.
Yes, sir.
The cost of the system is, I think if I recall correctly, 700 and some thousand? Or?
Just under, yes, sir.
Okay, and the offset will be that we're going to get rid of the CenturyLink payments?
Yes, sir.
And you said for the most part, what exactly are the numbers?
Well, I've given you a spreadsheet. It was I think it was attachment number 7.
Yeah.
So I don't have that right in front of me, but I can pull it up and discuss.
Well, over the last 3 years, so the first year initially, it's a increase of $14,615. But then starting in the second year and also in the third year, it's a savings of over $17,000. And then in the fourth and fifth year, it's a savings of almost $174,000 annually.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so 17,000 for the second and third year. Is that a month or is that a total savings?
It's an annual.
An annual.
Okay, so we've got 17, and how much are a year, 4 and 5?
$174,000.
Each year.
Coming back to us, right?
Okay,
Right.
does that offset 750,000?
Well,
Yes.
the bill for CenturyLink in it right now is $300,000 per year. So over the next 5.
So that's in addition to that? Is that what
No,
you're
sir.
saying?
Well, if you look at the CenturyLink bill and we did nothing over the next 5 years, we'd be paying $1.5 million,
Right.
roughly. And so this particular solution is a $700,000 solution, and that's it. And so initially, we'd be offsetting the $1.5 million cost of CenturyLink over 5 years with a $700,000 phone system cost. Now, there are some financing costs in there, and we can discuss this more on Monday night, or I can pull that chart out now. But because we're going to be going to voice over internet, we have a need for more SIP trunks, through which those phone lines run. So all that's factored in, including the maintenance on the system going out past year 4 and 5. But the net result is, upwards of $150,000 plus in savings beyond year 3, because we're paying for the lease the first 3 years. So it's essentially a wash there.
Right.
For the first 3 years. And then once you get to year 4 and 5, when we now own the equipment on the dollar buyout,
Right.
that's when the real savings of no longer having $300,000 annual phone bills, and that's offset only by the maintenance that we would have on these devices, on the phones
And
now.
This runs through Cox's cables,
Yes, sir.
and there's no increased cost for that?
No, well, what I mentioned too, and it's on that spreadsheet, is SIP trunks. And so right now, we have a
Got
certain
that.
number of SIP trunks that are in place for the schools that currently have the voice over internet.
We'll have to have more.
We factored that into this analysis that you've got on the spreadsheet, and that's all included as well. And so even net of that, there looks to be significant reduction in phone costs beginning in years 4 and 5.
Okay, well, thanks for the more detail, and I'll get with you if I have any other questions.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
But essentially, it's a win for us in that we'll have beyond year 5 support cost, but we won't be beholden to increased utility cost from CenturyLink or Cox, except for if there's a need for future SIP chunk.
Yes, ma'am. And the interesting thing is, and the board will know this, is as we've rebid internet services over the last few years, we've seen a significant decrease in internet costs. So we've been able to get more bandwidth and more resources for lower costs. So I don't see that trend changing. So that's another positive from moving over to the internet as opposed to CenturyLink.
All right, thank you, Mr. Horton.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Okay. 8.24. HRA contribution for new group medical insurance rating tiers, presented by Mr. Russ Frakes, Specialist, Risk Management, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Mr. Frakes?
I heard you call, Mr. Frakes, please.
Ms. Scallon, I know you were involved in this. You may want to.
All right, Ms. Scallon, you're going to
Assist.
come up too, I guess? Okay, reluctantly. All right, welcome, Mr. Frakes.
Thank you.
And Ms. Scallon. Tell us all about it.
Well, the Benefits Oversight Group, of course, the committee, the standing committee, includes Ms. Scallon as well as representatives from the union, met recently to consider the contribution level that will be made for the new tiers that have been added across all plans. That is the employee, we currently have the employee or employee plus family tiers. Next year, starting in January, we will add employee plus spouse and employee plus children tiers. In doing so, we needed to consider what the HRA contribution for those should be. Currently, the district contributes, the board pays $750 to the employee rate and $1,500 to the employee plus family rate. So those middle two tiers falling in between, there was some consideration given to what exactly that funding level should be, and the Benefits Oversight Group voted to fund that at $1,100 per contract or per policy. So each employee that has that tier will receive $1,100 in their health care reimbursement account.
Okay, so I think there may be some questions.
I just
Ms.
wanted to
Rush,
thank
sure.
the Benefits Oversight Group for their effort in coming up with the tier options, and again, ensuring that we have this benefit, this HRA benefit, which is a huge benefit to our employees who do opt to select one of our tiers. So I appreciate being able to still provide that to each tier option.
Very good.
Any other questions, board members?
And just to clarify,
Sure,
that,
Mr.
that
Bryant.
money is actually, that's the flex card. you're
That's
talking about.
correct. That is
So-
on the
so
flex
so
card.
our
The Take
employee-
Care card is what it actually says on the card, and it's a Visa card that's used,
Right.
can be used at doctor's offices and at pharmacies. You can use that money for dental and vision expenses as well. You have to file a paper claim in order to do so, but that process works very well also, is just as well as
And
that.
I said that out loud just because we still have employees who
We
don't
do.
know about that.
We do,
benefit.
Absolutely. Each year during open enrollment, which we will be starting here soon, we go over that information with all of the employees who attend our meetings. So we encourage people to come out and attend those open enrollment meetings so they get useful information like that.
If they don't know about it, they may have recognized or will recognize a accumulation effect. Is that right?
They actually do, yes, sir, absolutely. We were in a meeting, it was year before last, and a gentleman in the back of the room said, well, what is this you're talking about? And Kenny Anderson, who administers that for Lockhart and Williams, was there, and he carries a list with him of account balances. And the gentleman had over $4,000 in that account and was able to go back and pay a bunch
Pay some
of
bills.
medical bills that he had. So it was a windfall for him, certainly, so.
Because it does accumulate.
Yes, it
A
does.
lot
It
of
rolls
folks-
over from year to year,
That's right.
absolutely.
Question? Yes.
Revenue neutral, costing a little more, what's the result?
Difficult for us to say at this point. It was, we have, what we did is we looked at our census data that was provided by United Healthcare, and we can see from that we have 43 people that fell into a category that would be employee plus spouse. In other words, they're currently purchasing a family, in the family tier. but would be eligible to purchase coverage through the employee plus spouse tier. And there were 8 individuals that fell into the employee plus children tier that are currently in the family plan. So those individuals will see a decrease in their contribution level from $1,500 to $1,100. Certainly that is offset significantly by the premium savings that they'll enjoy. That those other tiers are going to offer much less expensive coverage for them relative to paying the full family premium that they are paying currently. What we don't know is what impact that will have, what influence that will have in folks that are currently maybe purchasing only single coverage, or maybe receiving single coverage because the district, of course, funds 100% of that premium, that opt to now purchase coverage for a spouse only or children only, or perhaps they even come in at family coverage because we've got that third plan there. So, and that is the hope, that we get more folks added to the plan. It's an X factor for us at this point, if you will. Unknown information and what influence that have. We will put the information, communicate the information to the employees, see what impact that has. So, in as much as there may be folks that are currently just simply on the single plan, there could be increased costs for that. But again, the hope is that in the long term that we get healthier, people bringing children in, things like that are typically going to be, from a morbidity standpoint, the healthcare costs that they generate will have a positive impact on our overall claims and see some downward pressure on our overall rate increases.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you both.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Mr. Franks. Okay, so moving now to Section 9, Superintendent's Human Resources Recommendations. All right, 9.1, Deferred Retirement Option Program, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent Curriculum and Instruction. All right, 9.2, Out-of-Field Report for 2018-2019 school year, presented by Ms. Karen Peak, Program Director of Professional Services, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
It's amazing how fast that cleans up after a month.
Yep.
Yes.
That's what monitoring does for you.
Yes, sir.
9.3, Personnel Recommendations, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.4, Employment Separations, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.5, Employee Transfers, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.6, Employee Termination, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.7, Employee Suspension, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.8, Employee Suspension, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.9, Reinstatement Reimbursement of Sick Leave due to Line of Duty Illness, Injury, Medical Examination, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.10, Leave Without Pay, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. All right, Section 10, Discussion Agenda, we don't know yet, unless someone wants to declare now. Section 11, Construction Program Owners Representatives Business. Mr. Walker, sir, do you have anything else?
Well, just Vince will be bringing the thing for us Monday night.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. All right, Information Technology Seat Management Contract 12.1, CACI Task Order Number 2-119 for the installation of Salto padlocks at Okaloosa Technical College, presented by Mr. Dustin Keith, Specialist Seat Management, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 12.2, CACI Task Order Number 2-110 for district-wide Avaya Unified Communication System Upgrade, presented by Mr. Dustin Keith, Specialist Seat Management, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
And I just want to
Sure.
say a final thank you to Dustin, because I know there will be many a happy face in our front offices and in our classrooms. The condition of our phone systems in most of our schools is shameful, as we've mentioned previously, due to just the age of our facilities. So I really appreciate all of Dustin's efforts, and hope he gets some snapshots of some smiling faces of front office staff. So thank you again for their efforts on this project.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. All right, so moving to section 13, Mr. Attorney, your business, sir.
No report today.
All right, thank you. Superintendent, you're next on section 14.
Just a couple of things. I need to see Melody and Mr. Palmer right after this meeting, and I also need to see Eric Mitchell when we finish.
Okay. And with those announcements, we'll move on to board members' announcements. And Mr. Bryan, I think I started with you last time. I'll go this way. Mr. Walker, do you have anything, sir?
No other, is Vince still here?
Yes, sir.
Vince, I want to catch you before you leave after the meeting. And I just, I've been under the weather and wasn't able to attend the last couple of meetings, but I noticed that the board, when y'all made a decision, I guess, to reinstate this teacher, I was wondering, Vince, we, have those appeals and stuff. Vince, we're on putting the employee back to work. Are we going to be liable to pay her attorney fees and all back pay?
Not fees, but it's when you reinstate someone's with back pay.
But we won't have to
No.
pay the attorney fees?
No.
Okay, that's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Walker. Mr. Destin?
I'll just have a request for some information. I guess there was some confusion over a communication that went out to the teachers about the bonuses that we've been debating about, whether we're going to apply them to the OTC instructors who do not, it's not clear they qualify.
Under statute.
And I was just wondering if we could, on Monday or sometime between now and then, get some clarification. Mr. Chambers, you may know the answer to that already.
Yes, the initial email that went out to all teachers was the board-approved document for Best and Brightest. On September 27th, we then sent the email to the adult ed teachers and to the pre-KD teachers, let them know the process that we were going through, and encouraging them, if they qualify, to also put in their scholarship application for Best and Brightest. So we sent it out to everybody and the two other groups of teachers as well.
That clarifies it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. Anything else? Good? You good?
I'll do it.
Okay. Ms. Rush? Anything?
I know it's been discussed in the local newspapers in regard and at county commission meetings. The counties have sent sales tax, infrastructure sales tax, and how they are setting up an advisory committee. And I was wondering, Ms. Jackson, if they are seeking recommendations currently for different projects for use by these funds. And I know that we have firsthand knowledge through our transportation department of many roads that are unpaved, and also many roads that are heavily traveled or trafficked that don't have sidewalks where students walk, whether on an unpaved road or directly on the road or on the right-of-way, as well as stormwater issues that impact the safety of our drivers and children in the mornings and afternoons. So I was wondering if the district will be submitting a list of areas where we feel from a school district standpoint that the county could improve in infrastructure items such as paved roads, sidewalks, potentially lighting, stormwater issues, and things of that nature.
I have not been asked by the county commission to do that at this point. I would be happy to do that, but they have not reached out to us. But I will definitely look at that. And I'll get with Jay McGinnis, because he would know more about it than we would.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then I wanted to announce that I believe the Niceville High School choral performance, that's an annual event for their holiday performance. Those tickets are on sale. They'll be performing at the Maddie Kelly Arts Center, I believe at the end of November. And so you can go to the Niceville webpage for more information on that, or on Facebook, as well as Maddie Kelly Arts. And I don't know if Mr. Bryant was going to mention the Growth House had their ribbon cutting, and it was a phenomenal event at Silver Sands. And I just wanted to thank the teachers at Silver Sands, along with the administration, teacher Dan Cheon, and Beth Wright and Mr. Williams, for all of their efforts in working with the Impact 100 Northwest Florida group to make that grant application successful, and to see the children's faces. I know several of us were there for that ribbon cutting. It was just an amazing event, and I'm looking to forward to many community volunteers working with our students, and also wanted to thank the Mr. Williams and the Master Gardeners groups in our community, who also had a big impact on the Growth House. And that's it.
All right, thank you, Ms. Thrush. All right, moving on to section 16.
We left Mr. Bryant off.
I am so sorry, Mr. Bryant. Please go ahead.
No, thank you, Dr. White. Just a couple of things. Yesterday, I wanted to say thank you to Senator Gaynor and to Representative Ponder. They visited 3 schools yesterday. I know Senator Gaynor was at the Technical College and went to Crestview High School. And one of those, having those gentlemen visit our schools is part of the legislative initiative that we're trying to educate our elected officials on what's going on in the schools. And I can tell you, I talked to both of them this morning, and both of them had very positive things to say about the technical school, about the Crestview High School, and Wright Elementary School. So a lot of great feedback that I received back from those elected officials. And then finally, just real quick, Ms. Jackson, I just wanted to commend you on your selections of principals throughout the school district. And I visited Elliott Point the other day, and I just want to say that Ms. Ard and Mr. Ness are doing a fabulous job over there. We got a great tour of the school, and just a lot of the great things that are going on in that school. And that's one of our most challenging schools, but with their leadership and the teachers and everybody that's there, it's such a great school to go walk into. So I commend you and commend Ms. Ard and the rest of the staff at Elliott Point for a great tour.
Thank you, Mr. Bryan. I apologize again.
That's okay.
I was just trying to move us along. All right. All right, 15, we covered board members' announcements. Section 16, public comment. All right, section 16, I have a couple of public hearings I need to announce here. 17.1, public hearing for the adoption of a new job description for a document data technician, presented by Ms. Lindsay Maxey, Program Director, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. All right, 17.2, public hearing for adoption of a revised job description for TSA Instructional Technologist, presented by Lindsay Maxey, Program Director, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. All right, is there any other business or anything else, Mr. Attorney, we need to cover you can think of? Board members? Y'all good? All right, we're adjourned.
See you, big man.
See you later.
See you later.